Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, July 1st, 2019. Happy July, everyone. And I'm your host, Cara Santa Maria. I'm really excited about this week's episode, but before we dive in, I want to thank those of you who made Talk Nerdy possible. Remember, Talk Nerdy is and will always be 100% free to download, and that's because of the model that I use, which means that it's paid for from advertising and also from support from listeners just like you. So if you want to support the show, all you've got to do is go to patreon.com/talknerdy and you can learn how to pledge your support. I want to thank the top supporters this week on Patreon, and they include Phil T-Bear, the Zombie Drummer, David J.E. Smith, Gabriel Felipe Jaramillo Gonzalez, Brian Holden, and Jeffrey Sewell. There are other ways to support the show. You could rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or anywhere really that you get podcasts. You can also visit the Talk Nerdy store at talknerdymerch.com or at carasantamaria.com and click through. And you can buy some super cool Talk Nerdy merchandise, including Talk Nerdy stuff featuring Killer the Science Dog. You know him, you love him. He's so freaking cute. All right, guys, I'm super excited about this week's episode. I had a chance today to chat with Rob Ulrich. Now, he's a second-year PhD student at UCLA, actually studying biogeochemistry, and he is the founding president of Queers in STEM, and we're going to be focusing quite a lot on that topic today. So without any further ado, here he is, Rob Ulrich. So, Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we're actually in person, which is cool because I don't get to do that very often. I'm always excited when either somebody's coming through town for a book tour or something like that, or they already live in LA, and you're at UCLA.
I am.
You are. So you had to fight some traffic to get here.
Did.
Because people who don't know Los Angeles don't know that I live on the east side of Los Angeles, and UCLA is on the west side of Los Angeles. It is very, very far away. Do you live near campus?
I do. I live in Westwood Village, just like right south of campus right now.
Oh, nice. And are you from LA?
No, I'm from Virginia.
So you came here for grad school?
I did. I ran away.
What about your undergrad? Where'd you do that?
I went to Virginia Tech.
Oh, cool. Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
So you stayed relatively close to home for that.
It's like probably as far away as I could have gone without actually leaving the state.
That's a good plan. I think that's probably not uncommon for people when they do their undergrad. But now you're actually here today to talk about LGBTQ STEM Day, or LGBT STEM Day, LGBTQ plus STEM Day, whatever you want to call it. It's a Pride Day for STEM. Yeah. So, I mean, this is coming up, right? July 5th, 2019. What is this all about?
So last year they had the first LGBT STEM Day, and I think that was more just trying to be a show of like, hey, we're here, we are LGBTQ plus scientists in STEM, and it was just very much about visibility and just being like, hey, we are scientists too.
Yeah.
Notice us.
Yeah, for sure. And that was started, I'm looking at the website Pride in STEM. Mm-hmm. Is this a British organization?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a global thing.
Mm-hmm. International. Oh. It explains the date.
The day after the 4th of July.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really funny. Pride in STEM, founded in 2016 by Dr. Alfredo Carpenetti with his husband Chris and Matt Young, a graduate researcher from the University of Nottingham. Oh, nice. Okay, so how did this spread so quickly, do you think?
Social media.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, the beauty of Twitter and Facebook.
And so what is the relation then to UCLA? Is there an organization there that you're involved in?
So Queers in STEM was the organization that I co-founded with a few other people when I finally actually got to UCLA and like moved to Los Angeles, which I was like so excited to do because I was like, I'm finally going to be in a city that has like queer culture and I'm going to be able to like have it everywhere, easily accessible and like around me. And then like, I don't know, I got to UCLA. I like went to their like resource fair of like all the LGBTQ plus student organizations, and there wasn't one for like STEM. And I was like, upset. I was like, this would be the school to have something, but they don't.
Oh, weird. So there was a lot of on-campus support for the LGBTQ community, but there was nothing with science.
Exactly. Like, I'm pretty sure like ranked wise, UCLA has like the number one like LGBTQ plus campus resource center, and they are amazing.
But the science kids hadn't taken the time yet, or maybe there just hadn't been any outreach there. So do you know how big the LGBTQ plus population is at UCLA in the sciences?
I don't know.
Yeah, right? Because it's something that was never connected up until then.
We have like 200 people on our email list.
Okay.
And I think it touches like every department with at least like one person in each department, which is kind of interesting.
Definitely, because there's a lot. I mean, UCLA is a super big university.
It's
so there's
enormous.
Yeah, there's a lot of different science departments within pretty much anything you can think of, from geology to neuroscience to, you know, different biologies, different chemistries, material science, all that kind of stuff. And even engineering, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And also mathematics, that's included in STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. Oh, computer science too.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you said about 200 people on the email list. Does that include individuals, I would say like myself, who would consider themselves to be allies of the LGBTQ community and want to be involved in some of the different organizational aspects? Or is that mostly an LGBTQ list?
I think it's definitely mostly an LGBTQ list. The only allies that I know that are on there are like people I personally know.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit more about the organization. Did you say that you co-founded it? So you started it with some friends or colleagues?
Yeah. So going back to how amazing our resource center is I emailed them after that resource fair, and I was like, hey, I really want to start this organization. How do I do this? Because I don't know any of like the bureaucracy of UCLA and like how to start an organization. And then they actually connected me with like 3 other people who had brought up the same sort of idea.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, I mean, I guess not random, but random. It's very cool.
It was just like, yay.
So then you didn't have to do it alone.
Exactly.
And so who were those people that you started it with?
So I believe it was Remy Engels, Andrea O'Ray-Orden, and then Hannah Friedman, where it was mostly us. Remy and Andrea are both undergraduates. They're going into their second years now.
Oh, wow. So they're go-getters.
I know. Yeah. And they've, I guess like I somehow became like most in charge because they got busy with like school and like the weed out classes, like picking up. And I was like, yeah, you do you.
Yeah, well, I already had to do that. I'm on the other side of that for sure. Because you're a graduate student, right? What year are you?
I'm just finishing my second year.
Oh my gosh, me too. I know. It's the worst.
Just like finally finishing up the classwork.
Me too. You're much younger than I am, though, I would assume, because I took 10 years off before I went back for my PhD.
Yeah, you were like working and stuff.
Yeah. But the last, at least for my program, which is probably different from yours because mine's applied in psychology, I'm pretty close. I have a couple classes next year that are like, that you still have to do within your third year, but the coursework is down to like 6 hours a semester or something. But yeah, I'm finishing this semester all the really heavy coursework, and it's murdering me. How are you holding up?
I only had one class this quarter.
Oh, because wait, you guys are on quarter systems?
We are on quarters.
We're on trimesters. Okay.
Oh, interesting. I don't know the difference.
Sounds very pregnancy oriented. You only had one class this quarter?
Yeah, it was my last one. Because I was trying to get them out of the way as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But it turns out that, so we're like making a graduate student handbook now for our department. And it turns out I might have taken a few too many, like not too many, but like extra. And I'm like, well, dang.
And do you pay, at UCLA, do you pay per credit hour? Or, oh, wait, you're a grad student in the sciences, so you don't pay for school.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, you're on fellowship.
Yep.
Thank goodness.
Exactly.
So what department are you in?
I'm in the Department of Earth, Planetary, and Space Science.
So you are, we were talking about this before we started recording. We randomly were at a pool party at Derek Muller and Raquel Nuno's house the other day, who, you know both of them because they've both been on the podcast if you're listening, but they were early on, probably like year 1 or 2. So we have like random crossover friends, but we didn't know each other yet.
Nope.
So we didn't talk to each other at the party. This was literally just like a week ago or something. It's kind of random. So you're in Raquel's department.
I am.
But you study something completely different.
Absolutely different.
What is your lab focus on?
My lab focuses on climate science and biogeochemistry.
So here on Earth.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you have you narrowed down on what your thesis project is going to be yet?
Yeah. So I have a number of projects, but the common theme of them all is me trying to figure out how different organisms are like making a functional like mineralized structure. So something like a shell or that like a coral has, or like a lobster or any sort of marine animal you can think of.
Okay.
And I might be starting a project with like a plant.
Oh, interesting.
I know. You wouldn't think that plants had minerals in them, but they do.
Okay. And so what kinds of questions are you trying to answer with regards to that?
So the other half of my lab, like they're more close to like geologists. They like go out to the field, they dig up holes, and they collect samples of things like foraminifera, which are just these small little microorganisms that grow calcium carbonate shells. And then they measure them for carbon, oxygen, and carbonate clumped isotopes on our mass specs. And from that data, they can calculate things like precipitation rates or like temperature. And so I guess my research goes into that. It's not that I guess.
You know.
I know. So my research is supposed to sort of like improve the tool that they're using by trying to figure out how, because it's all these different animals, they're so complex, they're all making their shells in different ways. So like trying to see how the different ways that they're making their shells affects how they are recording those like environmental signals.
Yeah. So because basically, we can learn about our own ecosystem by sampling these organisms that utilize the stuff that exists in the air and the water, whatever, to create their shells. We can learn about climate change, or we can learn about drought, or we can learn about whatever. But they all do it differently. Like a lobster and a coral are two different organisms.
Completely different.
Yeah, but we're just making assumptions based on like that the data will even itself out if we collect enough of it.
Exactly. We're like, oh, it's all the same like mineral. It's totally going to fall on the same line.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the case. And it does seem like we know a lot about, or at least I remember, because I do a lot of obviously science coverage as a science communicator, about 5 years ago, maybe even 10 now, it felt like story after story and headline after headline was about ocean organisms and their shells getting really thin and getting really brittle and getting really translucent. And the fact that they weren't making enough of this calcium carbonate or utilizing enough of this calcium carbonate was like a huge indicator of ocean acidification. Like I remember that story was everywhere, but you don't hear about it as much right now. And I can't imagine it's getting better. I can only imagine it must be getting worse.
I honestly don't even know if it's like absolutely necessarily true.
Oh,
like that
interesting.
Correlation. Yeah, so
maybe that's why we're not hearing about it much anymore.
Yeah, so like Dr. Justin Rees, who I believe is at Northeastern, he did this like massive culturing study. So he grew like 18 different marine organisms in controlled conditions in just pretty much these giant aquariums. And they kept them at the same temperature, but then each tank was like at a different level of carbon dioxide. And so they were measuring the calcification rate, so the growth rates of the shells. And because like from that story, you'd expect it would to just be like negative as you increase the concentration of carbon dioxide.
Because that's really what ocean acidification is, right? There's more carbon in the atmosphere, the greenhouse effect, there's more carbon in the atmosphere. The ocean is a giant sink. It collects more carbon, which makes carbonic acid, and then it's more acidic. That's like what's happening all over the place. So yeah, they're like, the ocean's more acidic, the shells are getting thin. But he did this in a controlled way.
Yeah.
What did he find?
Yeah. So it's like some of them completely follow that as you'd expect, but then some of them also showed like a parabolic response, or they like hit a threshold and then started declining, or they had like the crustaceans had like a positive response where they like weighed more, because they did this all by weight.
Yeah. Because the shells are heavy. That's really interesting. I mean, and I guess that informs the kind of stuff that you're doing, which is like organism to organism. You can't use the same sort of algorithm. They all respond differently.
Yeah. Granted, it's like it was by weight, so we don't know if it's like actually like mineral they're growing more, if it's like something else they're growing more, if they're like changing what they're like secreting.
True.
Yeah. I don't know.
So there's even ways to refine that. Don't you love that about science?
Yeah. You like figure something out and then there's more questions.
Yeah. There's like a million more things that you can do. You will never not have a cool research project if you go into the sciences, people. There will always be something you can study. So, Rob, I'm definitely really interested because I want to make sure that it's super clear the connection between LGBT STEM Day, which is July 5th, 2019, which is overarchingly kind of organized by Pride in STEM, and Queers in STEM, which is the group that you helped co-found and run at UCLA. So, like, for example, if anybody is listening to the show right now and they're like, my campus doesn't have an LGBTQ STEM organization, I want to be involved in that, I want to start one. They don't need to necessarily become a chapter of something bigger. They can just start whatever they want on campus.
Yeah.
That's what you did.
Yes. Because there is this like there is a larger organization called Out in STEM.
Okay.
But I didn't learn about them until like after.
Gotcha. So there's probably resources online if you wanted to join up with something bigger, or you could do your own thing and then I guess just connect with these other organizations. Because when I look at LGBT STEM Day, you have on your Queers in STEM Twitter page, you have like a banner at the top for LGBT STEM Day. And I see all of these like Pride in STEM, House of STEM, Inter-Engineering, LGBT STEM, 500Q, is it 500QS?
Queer Scientists.
Queer Scientists, gotcha. LGBT plus Physics, Out in STEM. There's so many cool organizations across the board that I guess all collaborated. Oh yeah, look at that, 48 organizations.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So let's talk for a minute then about LGBT STEM Day specifically. So what's happening on July 5th?
So we're trying to get everyone to organize events in their own like communities. And we want this year to be like about visibility, but then also something more. So like doing a Wikipedia like edit-a-thon, or just like trying to highlight queer scientists and engineers and mathematicians.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's really kind of about making sure that historical individuals who have made a big difference, who maybe have been underrepresented, are heard and seen, but also about all of the individuals who are actively working in the field to just celebrate.
Yep, exactly.
Celebrate being scientists and being LGBTQ. Do you have any professors who are involved in your organization?
We have at least 2 on our email list.
Oh, that's good. So at least you know of 2 people that that are involved. And what about so everything from undergrad to graduate students to postdocs are involved?
Yeah.
That's really cool. And do you guys do anything else throughout the year other than this big STEM day?
Yeah. So this is our first year being super involved in the day. So during the year, we've been having events like working with the astronomy club on campus to have like a private telescope show. We were working with a postdoc in plant ecology, and he would take us to one of the UC nature reserves, and he would just like take us on a nature walk and like talk about the different plants and like talk about the research that was going on there. And he was gay, but now he just moved to Australia, so that's sad.
We lost him.
We did.
Maybe he'll come back and visit.
We need another one.
Another postdoc or another nature walker. I love it.
Exactly. And then also just like we have like ice cream socials, coffee socials, and my favorite one is we organize like a short little lightning talk and like research symposia. And the first one, it was just like our organization, Queers in STEM, and we were just like, hey, if you're a queer scientist or engineer and you want to give a lightning talk, so like 5 minutes to talk about your research to everyone, sign up. And everyone seemed to really like that. And I was really received well.
Oh, that's really cool. I like that a lot. It seems like there's a real need to, because like undergrad, grad school, even I think postdocs, it's hard enough, I think, to like keep your head down, focus on your work, like just get through the semester. There's a lot of difficulty for a lot of students, especially if you're far from home, you don't know a lot of people. It's so important to have a community. And I think you do find a community in your lab because you have common research interests. But sometimes it's really great because you come from all walks of life and you get to meet people you never would have met before. But sometimes it is important, I think, to find a community that has like shared values, shared interests, things like that. And it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And it can feel a little, I don't know, like forced if you're on your own trying to go out and be like, hey, I'm gay. Are you gay? Do you want to hang out with me? Is that a weird thing to ask? Yeah. But if there's a space that people can go to, like on the calendar with the events. So is that really kind of the purpose that you put? It's just about social support, really?
Yeah, it's mostly about like having this community of like that supports and encourages one another, and also give each other like role models and like mentors, because now that there's like data looking at the retention rates of like LGBTQ students in STEM, it seems like having mentorship is like one of the biggest ways to, I guess, mitigate people leaving.
And so is that like compared to the straight population? Actually, into the straight and the cis population, actually, the retention rate is lower?
Yeah. So it's like the statistic is LGBTQ plus students are 7% less likely to stay in science. And they'll either, and this, I guess, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it. It's like, because I don't know if they published that data yet. But,
gotcha.
But now they're like starting to look even further, where it's not just like, did you stay in science? It's like, they're also starting to talk about, they're trying to bring in some like qualitative data. Mm-hmm. So trying to be like, okay, so like, why did you leave? Like, how do you feel? Where are you going to? Whether it's like out of science or out of engineering, just to another science, or if you're going to the humanities. So it's kind of interesting seeing all this work starting to come out about it.
Yeah, and it's important, right? Because there's so many potential variables, and it's really important to know if the reason that the attrition rate is higher there is because there's a lack of social support, or because there's, other institutional barriers that I think require advocacy. Is that a part of sort of your interest also in forming the organization? Is advocacy, like being able to, I don't know, help individuals who maybe are running up against institutional barriers? Obviously, at UCLA, I'm not saying it's like free and perfect, but you might see fewer institutional barriers than at, I don't want to call out Virginia Tech, that's not fair. But then like, I went to school in Texas, right? You went to school in Virginia. Like, we can only imagine that the LGBTQ students in some of the places where we come from are up against some more difficult issues.
Yeah, or like definitely like probably like having people less supportive and less understanding. But yeah, it's like even at UCLA in the STEM departments, and this like affects people who identify as female too, where it's just like, it's hard to find a woman's bathroom.
Yeah.
And so
because they're old universities, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that there's still institutional sexism and everywhere. We're not calling out UCLA specifically, but like literally everywhere in every field, definitely in the sciences. But some of these older laboratory buildings, it was all men. So there's only women's bathrooms on certain floors because that's where the secretaries worked. Like that's actually why it's organized that way. Because historically women weren't doing science.
Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah. Isn't that bananas? And so, yeah, that becomes an issue both for gender identification and for orientation. And all of these gender issues have a lot of overlap there. It's actually kind of interesting. I've always wondered this myself because I guess I do identify as like a straight cis woman. But, throughout the lifespan, I've been pretty open and obviously always identified as an ally. But even within LGBTQ culture, there are individual identifications and groupings. Everybody's really intersectional. And so there's advocacy required even within that, right? There's shades of like trans individuals are facing barriers that like gay white men don't face, and lesbian women or bisexual individuals are facing a lot of, even within the LGBTQ community, kind of difficulty.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that kind of at an organizational level?
Yeah. So I guess being an invisible identity, it's obviously going to have like a bunch of intersections with like race, ethnicity, and socioeconomics.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I guess I try to have like a really open mind and try to be really empathetic. And I try to not make any sort of like decisions without trying to get input from the communities that are the most marginalized. Because like I do always acknowledge that I am like I am biracial, but I am white presenting. I am like mask presenting. And so I do like benefit from those privileges. And so I try to use that to uplift and like create spaces and for other people to feel more comfortable.
That's huge, because I mean, I can only imagine that having a safe space, and whether it be an umbrella organization or just events that are planned, just being around other people who are like mindful of language, or who, you know, are mindful of their own privilege, or because finding yourself in a position where every day you are presented with these challenges helps you to reflect on that more. And I think we sometimes forget that just like the quote unquote socio-normative views or socio-normative behaviors are marginalizing. We see it left and right. We see people who are like, I don't want to have to be PC, so I'm just going to talk a certain way because that's how I was raised. Or I don't, you know, feel the need to be sensitive to how my words affect other people because I don't know people who my words would affect in that way. And so we have all these incredible people who don't even feel safe in like a classroom or a dinner party. And so just having a group to be able to be like, yeah, that happened to me yesterday too. Happens to me all the time. This is what I do. What do you do? You know, because also I think people who are listening who are like straight, cis, maybe, you know, whatever, are probably like, do you just sit around and talk about being gay all day? And it's like, probably
Is it us talking about being gay or talking about straight people?
Because, I mean, I guess some of the questions that are probably popping up in people's minds are like, well, why need, or not even need, but why have a queer in STEM group when you could have a queer group and a STEM group and you could just be a member of both communities? Why is it important for you to want to have an intersectional group there?
Yeah, I guess it's like, why should I have to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
Because I tried that too. I tried the Varsity Gay League in LA, so I tried doing gay kickball. And that was it was a lot. I'm like, I don't have time to like drive all the way to West Hollywood every Saturday to like get drunk and play kickball.
It's pretty funny when you first mentioned going to UCLA and how they actually do have a lot of really great like gay alliance kind of groups and a very strong culture there. I almost thought you were going to say, I was so excited when I moved to LA, and then I realized that like the core of gay culture in LA is in WeHo, which is not that, I mean, it's halfway between where you live and where I live. Basically, you probably had to drive through WeHo to get here. But the gayborhood is far away from West LA, and it's kind of far away from East LA too. So not to say that there's not cool stuff going on all over town, but you're right. You have to kind of go to where the culture is in LA. It's big. It's actually its own city. West Hollywood is its own city. Most people don't know that. Like they have their own police force. They have their own mayor. It's like an island city inside of Los Angeles.
I didn't know.
Yeah, right? Isn't that cool? That's why on the sides of the cop cars or on the street signs, you'll see this outline. It almost looks like the shape of a gun, but that's because that's the districting of the city. Oh. That's the shape of West Hollywood. So it's the boundaries at all the streets where West Hollywood is cut off. And it's great. I mean, like, LA, probably in America, has the most vibrant gay culture, like in the entire country.
That's why I was so excited to move.
Yeah, I think that that's really common. But also, you know what? I've talked to a lot of people like gay women, for example, or my bisexual friends who are like, yes, the culture is vibrant, but it's definitely a gay culture more than anything in LA. So even like they might feel like it's kind of hard to meet my people.
Yep.
Because like LA is just, it's very gay.
Yeah, it's very cis white gay.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, we have a massive trans population in LA, which is great, but you see the social stratification. We have a massive homelessness problem and our trans population is victimized by that problem a lot. We have massive sex trafficking issues. We have, and so this is a really, I think, complicated and stratified conversation. I'm wondering how common, I mean, we know that trans in STEM is an important identification, and we know that there are many, many trans people in STEM. Is it difficult, or have you come across any struggles with group membership or with identification kind of in your UCLA chapter?
I guess, what do you mean by trouble?
Like, is it hard to recruit, or are people finding you pretty easily? Obviously, the numbers are small across the board, but they're not as small as I think people think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess we do have a pretty hard time like getting people to like come out and like especially help plan the events, and then going to the events is like a whole other thing. We have some people who identify as non-binary, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I'm not looking at data here, so I kind of feel like maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but it definitely is
like a numbers thing.
It's a numbers thing, and it also in terms of like a marginalization of groups, this is something that I think in the greater community of like the United States, a lot of people are just only getting hip to. You know what I mean? They're just only realizing like gay pride has been on people's minds since the 70s. And I think it's become something that was a big, big fight. And I think that, like you said, kind of oftentimes cis white gay men were out in front of that fight, and that was the bleeding edge. And so it's still a big issue, obviously, but there was a lot of eyeballs. And I think that it's only like in 2018, 2019, maybe 2015, moving on, that people are understanding these issues of the trans community, bathroom bills, and, it's become much more of a political issue now.
Yeah, but I guess I'll just correct that.
Yes,
quick.
Please.
So it wasn't like the pride wasn't started by the cis white gays. It was actually started by queer trans people of color. Like,
of course, and all we saw in the news was the white cis gays.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Them presenting sex workers, and it's like they are the people who did all the work, and like are why we are at where we are today.
Which is so frustrating because, of course, the acceptance, I think, from the maybe a little bit more regressive American standard kind of view really was with like, the what would you call kind of the classic rom-com caricature of what a gay guy should be. You know what I mean? And so then that became like, oh yeah, totally. I have a gay friend, and of course these people, like you said, that were at the front lines, it's like they were fighting every day and often dying for the rights of all of their friends and family and themselves, and yet still to this day, it's a really big fight.
Yeah,
and it's sad that there is this us and them mentality that you still see heavily. It's such a tribal mentality in our Western society, and I don't know, like, obviously groups like yours are pushing back against that. I mean, they're important. They're so important for visibility. That's the whole point of this day on July 5th. what can individuals who don't identify as those groups, like how can they be allies and how can they become involved to help with that fight?
Yeah, I think like the best way to be an ally is to just be like very proactive about it, like not being a bystander who like sits back. So like if you do know people that are a part of these marginalized groups, and this goes for like any sort of underrepresented group, is to amplify their voices instead of trying to speak for them, like not being afraid to mess up and like just like standing up for these groups. And if you get like called out because you messed up, don't like get defensive about it. Be like, it's hard for me. It's like, because it's not about you. Like.
Exactly. No, totally. Like, yeah. And you're right. That's, I think, a very standard way. It's a very human way, but it's a very standard way that a lot of people probably react. Like, even just 5 minutes ago, I was talking out of my ass, and you're like, that's not exactly how it happened. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And that is fucking important, right? It's really fucking important because I think sometimes people get really like, oh, there's just so much fucking injustice in the world. And it's like, we want to do everything that we can, but also to kind of know your zone and to check your privilege. You're right, with any marginalized group is super, super important. I think also sometimes here in LA, we forget what it's like in the rest of the country. How often do you go home?
I go home in the winter and the summer.
Oh, you're a good kid.
Well, I don't go home. I go and see my partner.
Gotcha. So your partner's still over there. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't go home, but like I don't think I've been home in like 4 years. It's very bad. But so you do travel across the country, and you remember what it was like, kind of similar to where you grew up. And I think a lot of kids who leave home in order to go to hubs, like in order to go to New York or DC or Chicago or LA or like these bigger city or San Francisco, they remember. But when you've been here for long enough, you kind of get a little bit protected.
You like take it for granted.
Yes, absolutely. But then sometimes it's a good, I think, gut check too, to see that even in a place like LA, you see marginalization and you see, I'm looking for a word right now that I can't find. You see, do you have days like that?
Oh, all the time,
right? I have like the worst aphasia. Like people being taken advantage of. There's a better word, but I'm not going to find it right now. So like people being used, people's vulnerability or their life circumstances being used by predators, basically. And that happens every day. Like you drive down the streets in LA, you drive by a tent city, if you took the time to get out of your car and to talk to the people that are sleeping on the street and listen to their life stories, by and large, the amount of mental illness, the amount of marginalization because of low SES, racial disparity, LGBTQ status, like all these things, they're massive. Massive. I mean, these are kids who got kicked out of their houses. These are kids who maybe started to do drugs to self-medicate. These are kids, all different, who were sex trafficked when they were young, all different circumstances. But the amount of I think despair, even in a place like LA, which is like one of the most open-minded, progressive, forward-thinking places, we really just have to look outside of our own neighborhoods to see it. And of course, your organization is on a college campus. So you're mostly working with individuals who I don't know, have been lucky enough, have had the life circumstances, or have just busted their asses and maintained a capability to stay in academia, right? Which is a privilege in a way. Being in academia is a huge privilege. Like Pride in STEM, is there like an outreach component? Do you ever go beyond the walls of the university? Or is that something that you're kind of looking to do in the future?
Yeah, so there's I guess the first thing we're trying to do right now is we're working with some people who are at the LA LGBT Center, and we're organizing some people to go over there and give talks to the the youths that are there.
Oh, cool. To try and like maybe recruit or plant a seed early that science is for you too.
Yeah, like you can do anything you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the homeless youth population is mostly like queer and trans students, like not students, sorry, kids.
Yeah,
and it
for sure.
sucks. So yeah, they were like looking for people to go out and give them talks, be like, hey, this is a possible career path. And here's like some ways that you could get to like where we are, I guess.
Oh, that's really cool because, I mean, we talk about this probably almost every episode of the show, or at least many of them, because I ensure that there's gender parity on the show in terms of my guests. And I'm always at least trying to be as mindful as possible about representation on the show. And so whenever we get into those kinds of conversations, inevitably it gets to this point of like, if I don't see people who look like me, sound like me, talk like me in positions of, these academic positions of power, boardroom whatever, like seeing them do the jobs that I deep down love, I'm never going to think that's right for me. So
exactly.
If you're a young LGBTQ kid living on the street, it's a very big leap for you to think, oh, maybe one day I could be a scientist. Because for some reason in society, don't you feel like we scientists are like on such a pedestal and they're so separate?
Yeah. I feel like before I got to UCLA, I was like, oh my God, NASA is like this far-reaching dream. And now I feel like some of my like people in my department like work part-time at NASA. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, like you could easily work at NASA. You just got to apply. Like tons of my friends work at NASA.
I know, right? It's like, we're just people.
Totally. But for some reason, like, you see these polls, these like Gallup polls and things like that are like, can you name a living scientist? Or have you ever met somebody who's a scientist? And for some reason, it's like, no. Everybody's like, no. And it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like, I feel like you have to know a scientist, but maybe we're not doing a good enough job of telling the people when we're at a dinner party or when we're out and about, telling people, yeah, I'm a scientist. That's what I do for a living. Like we minimize it because we like don't want to have the conversation. Like when people go, "What is that? What do you do?" And it's like, ugh. I don't know.
Yeah, you're just like, I didn't sign up for this conversation.
But maybe we need to do a better job, right? Of
or maybe people say they're like job titles, and then people just don't pick up on it that like that like position is a science position.
You're right. It's definitely something that working more in like public television or media. And doing science communication, it's really funny how concrete the thinking is. So like on certain jobs, my title is like, I'm the neuroscientist. And so it's like, I haven't done neuroscience in 10 years. I'm not actively in a neuroscience. Like I have a degree, I have a master's degree in neuroscience. I am a full-time science communicator now, and I'm working on my PhD, but I am the neuroscientist. And that's like, it's just very concrete. Oh, so you are a neuroscientist. I know what that is because it ends in scientist. But if you say like, I'm a physicist, they might not even make that connection. Like, and it's not uncommon. Oh, I'm a neuroscientist. So you do brain surgery. Like, no, that's a actually it's a neurosurgeon. It's a physician. It's not a, there's the basic kind of science literacy in our country is no bueno.
Yeah, people think I study rocks.
Oh yeah. So what do you tell them when people say, what are you studying in school? I'm
like, well, kind of, but like rocks, but they're crystals that grow inside of living things.
They're like animal rocks.
Animal rocks, yeah. And then I'm just like, rocks. Our bones are crystals, and they're like, what?
I saw a really cute. What was this, like some tweet? If you're listening to the show, I apologize that I don't remember who you are that tweeted it, but I definitely liked it and retweeted it. And it was a woman who was like, me or like house guest at the dinner party. I try to avoid food with chemicals. My 4-year-old, everything or all food has chemicals. My 6-year-old, everything's made of chemicals. Me, very proud. Because it's true, like just those basic sort of understandings are really lacking in our culture and our society right now. And gosh, it's just so multifaceted. How do you not get overwhelmed? Feeling like there's too much to do to make a difference. There's too much like, how do you take it a day at a time, plan these things, and, just do what you can do to keep on going?
Yeah, because I guess that if you start getting to that point, then you're just kind of like, you're going down a spiral and you're like, this is depressing.
Yeah, you get paralyzed,
Yeah,
right?
you're just like, wow, does anything I do even matter? But I guess I try to stay in the mindset where I'm just like, I'm doing what I can in my like proximity. And some people have like reached back out to me and they're like, hey, like, thanks for starting this. And like, or like, hey, like, I really look up to you. You're like a really big role model. And that like makes me feel so good and like makes it feel like, it's not like that's not why I do it, but it's also just like, it feels nice that it's like I've at least made an impact on somebody's life.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, like, maybe for the people who are listening who aren't as dialed into LGBTQ communities and maybe don't have the experience, like have the privilege of not having some of the experiences that are the more kind of pushback experiences in your life, in the lives of people who are involved in your organization. Maybe you can help paint a picture without naming names or calling anybody out about what some of the things that you guys might talk about in some of these meetings, or just some of the trials, the tribulations, the difficulties that being LGBTQ plus in STEM present, that maybe people with privilege to not have ever had to deal with that just don't even know about.
Yeah. So I guess we already like talked about bathrooms a bit because that affects female identifying people too.
Mm-hmm.
Pronouns are a huge thing because like science is a huge boys club and it's just these old like a bunch of like really mean old white guys who just are super conservative, and they can be like really mean and like discriminatory, and they're probably like the people who will like comment on my stuff where they're just like, why does this matter? Like, how does this influence science at all? I'm just like, well, dude, if you like are like literally like oppressing people in their like work environment, you're like not going to let them be themselves, and they're going to have to edit themselves. And that's going to like take so much mental and emotional energy away from them that they can't produce what they're capable of producing.
Yeah.
What else?
And also those pronouns, I mean, like you're talking about just an everyday interaction, or like at a conference, or when you're giving a talk, or like all of these things. But even in publishing, I still to this day come across, even in the social sciences, which should be hipper to this, male dominant pronouns in publishing. Like it's always the default is he. Or you know, the men, like humankind. It's always like mankind and stuff. And you're like, really? Today? Like, really?
You can't just say people.
I know. It's so frustrating. So yeah, it's pervasive.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So it's sometimes these more obvious things, like not having a bathroom to go to, or even if you do have a bathroom, not having an all gender bathroom to feel safe to go to. Pronouns, which is, you're right, it affects every aspect. It's this kind of like, you know, like microaggressions. It's this low kind of always there thing that maybe doesn't slap you in the face too hard. Sometimes it does, but it's more just like aggregates and aggregates and aggregates.
Yeah. And then just like geographic location, where it's like all these people are like migrating out of these more rural, like conservative areas, and then going to like bigger cities like LA and stuff. So it's like that hurts our like job prospects, like whether or not we'll get fired if we come out at work. Like people don't consider that sometimes.
Yeah, I think that there's an assumption. And, you know, I think sometimes stereotypes are really interesting cultural phenomenon, right? Because obviously stereotypes almost always caricature, but just like pseudoscience, the reason that it can grip people so easily is because there's sometimes a kernel of something in it that people identify with their own personal anecdotal evidence. And I think that sometimes what we might see, where was I going with that? You were talking about people leaving and coming into, I think the stereotype for a lot of people is that academia is somehow more progressive, like that it's more liberal, that it's a little bit more inclusive and understanding, that, you know, academia is the bleeding edge of social change. And in many respects, that's absolutely true. It's in these academic institutions where there's like the freedom of expression to be able to have social movements. But I think they also forget that the academic structure of tenure and of administration and stuff is very much an old, straight, white boys club. And that's got a strong grip.
Yeah, go into one of those lecture halls with like the walls of portraits of men.
Yeah.
They all look exactly the same.
Yeah, they're all wearing the same suit for some reason. No, you're so right. And it's sort of this weird contradictory thing where within these hallowed walls, like many people have been safe to experiment and have been safe to push the boundaries, but within reason, right? There's still kind of always this like, yeah, but not that. Not that's a little too far. And that must be, I mean, just soul crushing when somebody realizes that the safest place they could possibly be is still not safe.
Yeah, you're still like stifled and like, I don't know. Because especially with how schools are, they're sort of operated like businesses now where it's like they don't want any bad press. So if you like cause some trouble, they're going to like try to silence that, like make it seem like it never happened. And like especially with like the sexual harassment stuff now, it's like people are universities are like starting to just like take out more insurance. I'm just like, that is not right. Why don't you just like do something about the professors, or like, I don't know, like somehow have people, because they have all these like trainings and stuff to like sort of be like, oh, we're not liable for this. You had a training, you had a workshop, but it's like there's nothing enforcing people to like take action with like the things they learn in those workshops. And I find that so frustrating where it's like they can just shirk off the responsibility, where it's like, because they do have the power. And then people do know better, but then they're not held accountable to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so often those same people that multiple complaints are made against, that, you know, finally there's some big thing that comes out in the media where we realize this has been going on for decades, are usually people, who are tenured or people who have had a sort of respectful position within the university for a really, really long time. You don't see this happening as much with a new professor, a younger professor, because, I mean, the hope is that it's easier to cut them loose. But when these entrenched individuals, who so often are the ones who are the perpetrators, it's like, why are they so scared? Why are they so scared? Why is the administration so scared to just be like, yeah, we got a bad egg? And like when we first hired him in the 70s, things were different and now we're hipper to it and we can't stand for this anymore. It's such an American cultural ideal that like we're not allowed to be wrong, which is so contrary to science.
Yeah, where it's like, you're supposed to change with the facts.
Yeah, and you're supposed to be able to go, yep, I was wrong and now I'm adjusting.
Yeah.
And like, why can't we do that within our institutions?
Pride. I don't know.
Yeah. Different kind of pride.
Yeah. The bad kind of pride.
Exactly.
I guess it's like stubbornness, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's so frustrating. Pride is like, I'm always confused about, is Pride a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? In LA, I think it's like Pride all the time. But I know that I've been hearing a lot and seeing a lot of Pride hashtags and like, yay, it's Pride. Is it actively Pride right now? Do we have multiple Prides a year?
Yeah. So I think I've heard it as like a Pride season, because this is like, like starting like May at the earliest is when different cities start having their like Pride celebrations.
So it's really like city to city. There's not like a one organized kind of international Pride week.
Well, this year there is, because it's the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And so New York City has World Pride, I think.
Let's look it up.
Weekend?
Is it? Okay, cool. Let me see. NYC World Pride. This is why it's so good to record on a computer. 2019, Sunday, June 30th. So today is Saturday, June 22nd that we're actually recording this, although it's going to air in a week and 2 days. So Sunday, June 30th, which as of this airing is yesterday, because we just time traveled. Weird. Is World Pride. Oh, how cool. Okay, but really it's true that like here in LA at least, like it's Pride season.
Yeah.
Because I've been seeing a lot of happy Pride. Almost every weekend, all my friends are at Pride parties. Like, yeah, it's a good excuse to party.
There's like, I mean, we have so many of the little cities. So there's like Long Beach Pride. There's West Hollywood Pride. There's downtown LA Proud.
Oh, it's different. It's
Yeah,
proud.
it's different.
I see. That's good.
I think there's a little bit of tension between like the downtown LGBT community and like the West Hollywood community.
I could see that. I could see that. It's probably slightly different makeup there, different individuals. So, but specifically, July 5th is LGBT STEM Day. Yeah. And so what are you doing at UCLA with your chapter?
So because of the proximity to July 4th, we're actually having our little get together on June 29th. So that's Saturday, the week before. And me and Joby Hollis, who is one of the founders of LGBT plus physics, which is like also based at the UK. Joby works at JPL. We reserved a space at the LA LGBT Center for June 29th from 1 to 3. And it's just going to be like a big like sort of meet and greet, and then a type of like open mic where people can share their science and like the work they do, and just it should be fun.
Super fun. So that's even a little bit bigger, or a lot bigger potentially, than the UCLA chapter, because this is like community wide. Like anybody can come to it.
Anybody can come.
Oh, I love that. That's super, super cool. And what kinds of things are happening around the world on LGBT STEM Day?
Yeah, they actually, Pride in STEM and House of STEM, so Shauna Boyle, they put together a map, like a world map, where you can go to that map and see there should be like a little clicker thing.
Oh, I see. So it's under
every
events.
City. Yeah.
If you go to prideinstem.org/events, you can see a bunch of things that are happening. And then, this is really cool. I love it.
I know. They're great.
Yay. Oh, it's so great. And it's so cool that there's like so many different organizations that are kind of separate and have their own governing bodies and are doing their own thing, but that are like, yeah, let's all come together to kind of celebrate this together. Like, even if we don't necessarily live in the same place or have the same mandates or things like that we can all support this thing together. Yeah. Tell me, so Queers in STEM, I'm looking at your Twitter page right now, at Queers in STEM, bringing together LGBTQIA plus and other intersecting identities in science, technology, engineering, and math, based at UCLA. So I know that early on, individuals, we remember the days of LGBT or LGBT, LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus. What is I and A?
A is intersex and A is like ace or asexual.
Gotcha. So really the idea, and the plus is there because like we probably accidentally left somebody out, and we want to make sure that everybody's included.
I believe the current one, there's like, it's a very large acronym now, and the plus is sort of like to signify pretty much everything that isn't straight.
Yeah. So even whether you see LGBT, LGBTQ, I think the idea is if you add that plus on the end, then you're being a little bit more inclusive, because you might not be able to remember the whole acronym, or maybe there's only enough characters in your tweet to make it smaller. So you see it written differently in different places, and that's okay, because that's...
Yeah, and sometimes in different orders, because some people want to highlight different communities that have been more sort of, I guess, like, I don't know how to say it.
Like marginalized?
Yeah, like I guess like more marginalized. So some people put the T first, some people put the B first, because like bi-erasure is a thing, transphobia is still a thing, even within our own community.
Absolutely.
And it's so frustrating.
Yeah. And I guess the reason that so many people say LGBT is because it like just like rolls off the tongue. Like it's what we've seen for a long time, and it's easy to say the letters in that order. But I don't think it means that, there's any sort of hierarchy there.
Yeah. And I think that's why we chose to use queers and queers in STEM, because I think some people still take it as like a derogatory sort of thing. But I think for me and everyone else in our organization, we all sort of agreed that it is this like umbrella term for everything that's sort of just not the norm. So
how do you, what is your take then on individuals who are non-queer identifying using the term queer?
I feel like it all depends on context.
Yeah,
but
okay.
It probably depends on context.
Yeah. So like, you know, my queer friends, blah, 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 like queer pride, like those kinds of things are good. But obviously, if you're using it in a derogatory way, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Like, don't go around calling people queers.
Exactly. There you go. Gosh, am I allowed to ask you how old you are?
You are.
Okay. What year were you born?
I was born in 1995.
Oh my God. Oh my God. So you're 12 years younger than me. So you are, wait, you're 23?
I'm 24.
Okay. You turned 24 this year.
Aquarius.
Nice. So when I was growing up, I'm 35. And when I was growing up in Texas, I remember, I mean, obviously there were slurs that were thrown around left and right. I mean, it still happens to this day in North Texas where I grew up. But I remember, and was it like this for you when you were growing up in Virginia, that the word gay was a slur? And it was like, that's so gay.
Yeah.
Like people always said, that's so gay, which I never understood like what they even meant by that. And I don't think, here's the sad thing, I don't think that the young kids who were saying it, that they even understood what they were saying.
Yeah.
And then it just became part of the vernacular and part of the vocabulary. I mean, gosh, how do we put an end to that?
Call out your friends when they're saying problematic things.
Absolutely. You're so right. And it's, why is it so scary for us as young kids to be the one to be like, dude, like, why are you talking like that?
Because it's uncomfortable. And but like that's part of being a good ally is like being okay with that discomfort because you are in the right if you're, because like maybe one of your other friends is like in the closet.
Exactly. And maybe they don't feel comfortable saying, dude, don't say that because they're afraid it'll out them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ugh. That's like, oh, it's just so frustrating to think that like, I mean, there have been so many, I shouldn't be so like cynical. Like there have been so many changes and there's been so much progress over my lifespan, right? I was born in 83 and it's a completely different world than it was in 1983, which was like at the peak of homophobia and at the peak of just, oh God, like the quote unquote AIDS hysteria and all of this stuff. But like, it's so sad that there are certain things that are just haven't changed.
Yeah. And then if you like go into some of these communities that are more like, I guess like they have their own little micro bubble, it's like nothing's changed there.
Yeah. These insulated communities where it's still like there's still systematic racism, institutionalized racism within the legal structure, like probably massively unconstitutional stuff going on within towns in certain states where just all the people there are super homophobic or super racist and they're like, we don't care.
Yep.
And nobody's there to shake it up. And it makes you wonder, or it makes you realize that like, of course, that's why we have flight. That's why people leave. They don't want to stay there. But you're right. Then it F's up the economic opportunities and it F's up the capability for people to be able to live their lives the way they want to live them. What if you want to be what if you want to go be a farmer or you want to live in a rural area and you don't even feel safe in your own community? Like the only place you're safe is in West Hollywood. That's not fair.
And even like in West Hollywood, it's like there's also like this massive lack of non-alcoholic queer spaces. Like there's Cuties, which is like a coffee shop in LA that's like it's like a queer coffee shop. But yeah, it's like all these queer events, like a lot of these pride events, they're all surrounding drinking and partying, which is like, I think that's another reason why Queers in STEM is important.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, like, so are all these science events. I am so uncomfortable. Like, I don't drink and I go to a lot of conferences, whether they be skeptic conferences, science conferences, atheism conferences, things like that. And everything surrounds alcohol. And not only is it just uncomfortable if you don't drink, because like drunk people are annoying when you're sober, it's also uncomfortable from a safety perspective and like a sexual comfort level. Just like people are different when they're drunk and boundaries are crossed when people are drunk. And like just to have a safe place where you can be yourself and talk to people and be open or not open and comfortable and, you know, what introverted or extroverted and not feel the pressure to consume or to be at everybody else's level. That's huge.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. And so do you try your best to have these organizational events that are like not focused on alcohol?
Yeah, I don't think we have had an alcohol-based drink. It's also hard to do it at like a school.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
So-
there's like rules and shit.
So it just kind of works out that way.
That's cool. I really appreciate that. I respect that because I think that not enough people think about that because it's so like, again, like normative culture is alcohol culture.
Yeah.
And like not everybody drinks, people.
Yeah, not everyone wants to party.
Yeah. Some people just want a coffee. Not everybody drinks coffee either. So let's make sure we have decaf tea.
Some tea, have some water.
Exactly.
I don't know, have some juice.
Go hard on this water right now. So, gosh, this has been a really fun chat, Rob. Is there anything that I've left out about LGBT STEM Day, about queers in STEM? Like, there's so much cool stuff here. Is there anything that you want to make sure that you plug before we say goodbye?
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, if you're interested in having an event or just like using us for resources, just like check out the website, reach out to any of us on like Twitter or email. And then also like, I guess for allyship, it's like the only way change is going to happen is if people, and this is like for any type of allyship, it's just like if the only way change is ever going to happen is if people who are not a part of these underrepresented groups are the people standing up and like advocating for the change because we're already not in those positions of power.
Yeah.
And if we are, we're already like fighting to stay there. So ally, like if you want to be an ally, you have to make that like active choice because otherwise I don't know, it makes me pessimistic.
Yeah, because otherwise you're sort of passively complicit.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said before, which I think was such a good point that it really does bear repeating, being an ally means standing up and advocating for the voices, not erasing the voices and replacing them with your own voice or your own agenda. It's actually being empathic and listening to the struggles that you yourself have the privilege to have not had. And I think that that's an important point because it's very easy to sort of bulldoze over. We're all guilty of it because the minute that I have the floor, I might want to start talking about the things that I think are important. But it's like, no, the whole point here is that we're working together to affect change. Rob, I just realized that I didn't ask you the closing 2 questions that I ask everybody on the show, and they get so mad. People who listen, they get so mad when I leave them out. It's fair, guys. It's fair. It's super interesting. So I would love to get your take on my final 2 questions, which are, when you think about the future, number 1, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? The thing that makes you kind of maybe pessimistic, even a little bit cynical. You just mentioned one thing. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's more. And on the flip side of that, what are you genuinely optimistic and hopeful about?
Yeah, I guess since I just talked about it, it's like, yeah, it's that thought of like, is this ever going to change? And like, I also acknowledge that what I'm doing is like in my own sort of reach of like the STEM community and environment. But these are like issues that are not just in STEM. It's just like these things pervade society at large. And I find that like very scary and like very frustrating. Because I think when I think back on my own experiences and like what I have gone through, and I can pass this straight if I like really need to. I can't imagine like how hard it must be and like what people who are like trans and like people of color and like at that intersection must go through. And so I feel like that's why I try so hard to be like an advocate for like the community.
People with like a visible minority status.
Yeah.
Something that we often forget in kind of checking our own privilege, I think sometimes is the way that it's not just the way that we feel in the world, but it's the way that we present to the world and the way that other people feel about us and react to us. That for people like, I've had people on the show before talking about how they have to code switch when they have conversations with different people. And for some people, it doesn't come as easy as it does for other people. And that actually affects their potential to get a job or to get a promotion. And it's like, it's a lot. It's an absolute lot. And you're right. I could see that would be something that would kind of contributing to what you were saying, add to that sort of pessimism and that worry. But what about on the flip side of that? What are you hopeful for?
I guess like seeing how much social media has grown. So like things like 500 Queer Scientists, like I don't think I would have gotten as enveloped in the queer science, like Twitterverse, if like 500 Queer Scientists had never sort of came to be, because that has been such a great resource and like of just people to connect with who are just like me. And yeah, and like being able to see literal kids like being activists and advocates, it makes me so happy because like you have these kids now like growing up in their like respective households, but like no matter now like where you live, you have at least a window into like what the possibilities are out there. Like I had the internet, but I don't think Twitter was really a thing when I was like growing up.
And when I was growing up, like we were pre-internet, like the internet sort of, it existed, but it didn't have, like we were on dial-up early on and like basic chat rooms, and not everybody had access. And it wasn't really until college for me when it became pretty normal for everybody to have their own computer and to be able to do stuff. Like in high school and maybe even early college, we were definitely typing papers. Like my undergrad thesis was typed in the computer lab and like put on a diskette. It was definitely a different time. And you're right, like kids were alone. They were alone. Like if you were a Black kid in a white community, or you were a queer kid in like the South in a really regressive community, like you did not know that you weren't alone. And it's just not like that anymore. Not to minimize that a lot of people still have that experience because they can't go out for coffee with somebody, or they can't, they have to have only quote unquote these internet relationships, but at least they can see that they're not alone. And the media too, like there's cool TV shows and like Netflix shows and more we're seeing representation. We're not there yet, but
we're hopefully moving in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that gives me hope for sure. I definitely feel like I live in a different world right now. And I think the reason that like Donald Trump and that some of the issues that we're facing right now are such a slap in the face is because of the progress that we've made. It's why it's so hard to believe when somebody like that is in a position of power, because it's like, what?
Yeah.
But we've come so far.
I know. And then just to have it cut back.
I know. We won't let it happen.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, Rob, this has been a really illuminating chat. I think a really important chat. Where can people go? I know I asked you before, but like, what's your Twitter handle? Like, where can they go to read more?
Yeah. So my Twitter and Instagram are the same, just my name. So at Robert and Ulrich, Ulrich.
It's pronounced Ulrich.
Yes.
I'm glad you're telling me that now, because I may have introduced you as Ulrich otherwise.
I actually
I'm gonna write that down.
Met somebody at UCLA who has the same last name as me, but pronounces it Ulrich.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's incorrect.
My way is objectively correct.
It is German.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Rob, thank you for joining me today. It was a blast.
Thank you for having me again. I really had a good time.
Oh, good. And everyone listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.